It starts as kindness, as compassion, as empathy, so raw it nearly bleeds. You don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. You apologize when you're not at fault. You silence your needs before they can become a burden, and somewhere along the way, you vanish. What if being good isn't just noble? What if it's also a defense? A shield you built to feel safe in a world that once made you feel small, or broken, or too much? What if your goodness isn't always generosity, but survival? Okay. Anime is filled with characters who are too good, okay, who sacrifice everything for others, who apologize for existing, okay, who bottle their pain because they're terrified it might hurt someone else. And we admire them, but we don't always realize the cost. In this video, we'll explore the psychology of moral perfectionism, the quiet pain of always trying to be good, even when it destroys you, through characters like Tohru, Honda, Tanjiro, Kamado, Izuku, Midoriya, and Thorfinn. We'll explore how kindness can turn into self-erasure, and why healing sometimes means learning to be human, not just helpful. Because maybe the reason you're so exhausted isn't because you're failing. Maybe it's because being good was never supposed to hurt this much. I'm sorry. It's fine. Don't worry about me. These are the phrases of the quietly collapsing. In psychology, we often talk about moral perfectionism, a type of perfectionism rooted not in achievement, but in morality. It's not just I have to succeed, it's I have to be good. Good people are kind. Good people are selfless. Good people forgive, stay soft, don't get angry, and never hurt anyone. But what happens when being good becomes a full-time performance? Let's start with Tohru Honda from Fruits Basket. She's compassionate, gentle, always there for others. But her goodness isn't effortless. It's a mask worn so tightly it nearly breaks her. After the death of her mother, Tohru becomes emotionally selfless. She lives alone in a tent, so she doesn't inconvenience anyone. She constantly puts others first, even when she's suffering. She's terrified of being too much. So instead, she becomes nothing. Her kindness becomes a way to control how others see her, not out of manipulation, but out of fear. If I am good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, then maybe I won't be abandoned again. It's a story many of us unconsciously learn in childhood. We become the peacekeeper, the caretaker. It's the one who absorbs tension without causing any. But over time, that goodness turns inward, not into pride, but shame. Because the more perfect we try to be, the more aware we become of every tiny flaw. It becomes a cycle. I shouldn't have said that. I was selfish. I'm being too sensitive again. I'm the problem. So we try harder. We forgive when we're still bleeding. We smile when we want to scream. We stay when we want to run. All because we don't want to be the reason someone else hurts. This is what Tanjiro Kamado embodies in Demon Slayer. He's gentle even to demons. He sees pain even in those who've caused suffering, but his kindness isn't always strength. Sometimes it's guilt. After his family's death, Tanjiro takes responsibility for everyone. He blames himself when he can't save others. He doesn't allow himself to break, because if he does, the whole system of his goodness will collapse. To him, hurting is fine. Losing is fine, as long as he stays kind. This type of moral idealism is deeply admired, but it comes at a cost. There's no room for rage, no room for resentment, no room for real emotion, just endless composure and silent suffering. Even in quieter stories, this theme persists. In My Hero Academia, Izuku Midoriya idolizes All Might, the symbol of peace. And in trying to live up to that ideal, he repeatedly destroys his body. He doesn't want to be a hero because it brings him joy. He wants to be a hero because it might mean he's funnily enough. And here lies the deeper psychological wound. Being good becomes a transaction. If I'm good enough, they'll like me. If I'm good enough, I'll be safe. If I'm good enough, I'll finally stop hurting. But goodness, born from fear, is not peace. it's pressure. And then there's Thorfinn from Vinland Saga. He begins as a child, full of vengeance, rage, and grief. But over time, he represses it all. He swears off violence. He tries to become good, but the path isn't clean. He's haunted, conflicted, still hurting. And that's the reality of healing from moral perfectionism. It doesn't look like sainthood. It looks like wrestling with your humanity, again and again. Because the truth is, you're allowed to be kind and tired. You're allowed to forgive others and still be angry. You're allowed to care deeply and protect your boundaries. Goodness that erases you is not real goodness. It's a cage. And the key isn't to stop being kind. It's to stop believing that kindness is all you're allowed to be. Some trauma doesn't scream. It smiles, it nods, it says, "No, really, I'm fine." In psychology, there's a lesser-known trauma response called fawning, okay? Unlike fight, flight, or freeze, fawning is the response of appeasement, doing whatever it takes to avoid conflict, earn approval, or keep the peace. It's the child who becomes hyper-tuned to their parents' mood. It's the friend who always says yes, even when they're drowning. It's the adult who apologizes before they speak, just in case their existence causes discomfort. Fawning isn't kindness. It looks like love, but it's actually fear in disguise. Let's return to Tanjiro Kamado. He's known for his empathy, even toward demons. But beneath that, gentleness is something deeper, more painful. Tanjiro doesn't just feel for others. He takes responsibility for their pain. He apologizes when people die, even when there was nothing he could have done. He weeps not just out of grief, but guilt. This isn't compassion, it's compulsive caretaking. Tanjiro's empathy becomes a reflex, a coping mechanism. Because if he can understand everyone, if he can see their humanity, then maybe no one will ever leave again. Maybe no one will die, okay? Maybe he can finally make the world safe. When trying to be everything for everyone, he forgets to be something for himself. This is the silent tragedy of the fawn response. You become so focused on the emotional needs of others that your own needs disappear, and eventually, so do you. Consider Tohru Honda again. She's constantly anticipating what others need. She's the emotional glue of the entire fruits basket cast, soothing tempers, absorbing tension, offering warmth to the coldest hearts. But how often does Tohru ask for help? How often does she express frustration, sadness, or need? Almost never. Tohru has learned that voicing her emotions risks upsetting others. So, instead, she buries them. Her cheerfulness is real, but it's also protective, a buffer between her and potential rejection. Tohru doesn't want to be loved. She wants to be needed because that feels safer. But when love is only allowed in exchange for self-erasure, it's not love. It's a transaction. It's kind of goodness. The always agreeable, never needy, endlessly given persona becomes a survival strategy, and it works. It's people like you, people rely on you, people praise you, but they don't always see you, because the cost of fawning is invisibility. Okay. You say yes so many times that you forget what no even feels like. Hey, you shapeshift until your sense of self becomes paper thin. You become lovable only in the ways that are comfortable to others. And here's the paradox. You may be the most supportive, generous, kind person in the room and still feel completely alone, because connection without authenticity isn't intimacy, it's performance. The irony is heartbreaking. You're trying to avoid rejection, but in doing so, you reject yourself first. You hide your anger. You silence your sadness. You tell yourself you don't need anything, and then you wonder why you feel so hollow. This is what moral perfectionism so often becomes, a kind of emotional outsourcing. If I can be good enough for everyone else, I won't have to face how unworthy I feel inside. But that internalized unworthiness isn't truth. It's a wound formed early, reinforced quietly, and rarely questioned. Here's the truth most fawners never hear. Love doesn't require you to be small. You don't have to earn your place. Your yes is only meaningful if you're free to say no. Kindness without boundaries isn't virtue, it's self-abandonment. Let that settle for a moment, because if you've spent your life trying to be the nice one, the reliable one, the never problem one, then you may be carrying a form of trauma that's been praised into silence. And here's what's even harder. Healing doesn't mean becoming less kind. It means becoming more honest. It's to say, I'm not okay. To say, I need something too. To say, no, not this time. That is the courage fawners aren't taught. Not because they lack strength, but because they were never allowed to use it. The fawn response tells you, if you stop being nice, they'll leave. But the truth is, okay, if they only stay because you're convenient, they're not really with you anyway. And you deserve to be loved, not for your usefulness, but for your you-ness. So ask yourself gently, what parts of me have I hidden to be liked? What truths have I swallowed to keep others comfortable? And then remember this, if you can't say no, your yes doesn't mean anything. Being good should never cost you your voice, and love should never ask for your disappearance. On the surface, it sounds enlightened. A man once soaked in violence, now renouncing it all. But if you watch closely, Thorfinn doesn't look free. He looks hollow, because peace isn't the same as healing, and renouncing violence isn't the same as forgiving yourself. In Vinland Saga, Thorfinn's transformation from a vengeful child into a pacifist is treated as a kind of moral victory. But Jung would warn us, be careful with your virtues. They often hide what you've exiled. Till you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung, this is the heart of the shadow, the rejected self. It holds our rage, our jealousy, our hunger for power, the parts we were taught to fear. We don't erase them, we suppress them. And suppression, as it turns out, doesn't heal anything, just buries the wound deeper. Thorfinn is a case study in this kind of moral suppression. It's haunted by the people he's killed. He swears off all violence. He endures beatings, humiliation, and slavery, not just because he must, but because he believes he deserves it. This isn't redemption. It's atonement through self-erasure. Thorfinn no longer wields a blade, but the rage, the grief, the shame, they're still inside him, just redirected, not outward, but inward. This is the hidden danger of unfelt anger. It doesn't vanish, it calcifies into self-contempt. You punish yourself for what you were never allowed to feel. And in doing so, you become a quieter version of the same wound. Because repressed rage isn't harmless. It corrodes the soul from the inside. It turns you into a ghost, present but muted, alive but distant. You stop exploding and start withering. We see echoes of this in countless gentle characters in anime. The ones praised for their calm, their composure, their forgiveness. Will look closer, and you'll often find someone who's never been given permission to be angry. Someone who's learned that rage makes them unlovable, so they bury it beneath softness. Okay, but buried rage doesn't make you good. It makes you invisible, even to yourself. Consider how culture rewards this. The gentle hero is canonized, the one who forgives the abuser, the one who saves the enemy, the one who suffers quietly and is praised for it. But where is the space for anger? Where is the space for the sacred no? Where is the space for saying, this hurt me and I'm not okay? We live in a world that often moralizes politeness over wholeness. You can be falling apart inside, but as long as you're agreeable, you're mature. You can be consumed by injustice, but as long as you don't raise your voice, you're strong. But what if rage too is sacred? What if there is nothing wrong with your fire, only with the world that told you to drown it? Jung believed that the path to individuation, true psychological wholeness, lies not in becoming better, but in becoming more honest. And honesty means confronting the parts of you you've buried, the part that wanted to scream, the part that still resents, the part that knows it was wronged. You're not a better person for swallowing your rage. You're just a quieter one. Let that land, because the good ones, the ones who suppress, comply, and internalize, are often the ones who break in the most invisible ways. They dissociate. They people please. They sabotage themselves. They hurt quietly and call it healing. But rage, when integrated, isn't destructive. It's directive. It tells you what your boundaries are. It tells you what matters. It tells you this shouldn't have happened to me. The work is not to extinguish your anger. It's to listen to it. It's ask, not, how do I make this go away? But, what truth is this fire trying to tell me? Okay. When Thorfinn finally begins to confront his inner darkness, not just reject it, he doesn't become violent again. He becomes real, because peace without wholeness is a facade. And wholeness means embracing all that you are, not just the parts that make others comfortable. So, if you find yourself praising your calm while silently rotting inside, if you've been told that anger makes you dangerous, childish, ungrateful, remember this: your rage is not the enemy. Your silence might be. Let's ask the question that kindness often hides. Who are you trying to be good for? Not in theory, not in your ideal self-image, but in practice, in those quiet, anxious moments where your kindness feels more like survival than sincerity. Are you kind because it reflects your values, or because it keeps you safe? Are you soft because you're grounded in compassion, or because you're terrified of being rejected? We live in a culture that praises niceness, that uplifts the agreeable, the quiet, the gentle. But it rarely asks what that gentleness is costing you, because too often what looks like goodness is just a mask for fear. Think of characters like Tanjiro or Tohru. They're cherished for their empathy, their compassion, their unwavering forgiveness. But beneath their warmth, there's a subtle undercurrent, a belief that their safety depends on being good, not just because they value kindness, but because they've learned, often painfully, that if they are not kind, it might be abandoned. Tanjiro apologizes even when he's not at fault. He takes responsibility for things he couldn't control. He comforts demons as they die, even after they've killed innocents. And while his empathy is real, there's also a quiet desperation to be seen as good, as if being anything else would make him unlovable. Tohru, too, bends herself around others. She anticipates needs before they're spoken. She smiles when she's hurting. She sacrifices her own boundaries for harmony. But harmony bought at the price of self-erasure isn't peace, it's a performance. This is the danger of performative morality, the kind that's not rooted in agency, but in anxiety. You become good not because you choose to, but because you're terrified of what happens if you don't. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned that to be safe, to be loved, we had to play a role: the protector, the caretaker, the peacemaker, the mature one. And once those roles took root, they became hard to put down, because the moment you stopped playing them, you felt guilty, as if letting yourself be messy, angry, or in need would make you less worthy. This is especially common in trauma survivors. The child who grew up walking on eggshells becomes the adult who over-apologizes. The one who was only praised when they were helpful becomes the person who doesn't know how to rest. We mistake hyper-responsibility for virtue. We call it maturity. We call it goodness. But what if it's just exhaustion in disguise? What if your goodness was actually a response to conditional love? I'll be good, so you don't leave. I'll be kind, so you don't get angry. I'll be selfless, so I'm not a burden. This isn't morality, it's coping. And no matter how noble it looks on the outside, it will eat you alive from the inside. The scariest thing about unlearning performative goodness, is realizing how many of your relationships were built on your silence. The moment you stop saying yes to everything, the moment you set a boundary, the moment you say, I'm not okay right now, some people will pull away. And that hurts, because it confirms the fear you've carried all along. I was only lovable when I was useful. But here's the truth. That pain isn't proof that you should keep performing. pourquoi? It's proof that those connections weren't rooted in your realness, only in your compliance. Authentic love doesn't require your erasure. It doesn't ask you to shrink, suppress, or censor. It welcomes your whole self, the kind parts, the angry parts, the tired parts. And when you start honoring all those parts, you'll begin to see who's truly capable of loving you back. There's a recurring figure in anime, the good one. Always helping, always calm, always smiling. Characters like Shouko, Nishimiya, or Mob in his early episodes. They rarely complain, they rarely say what they want. Okay, forgive even when no apology is given. And audiences often idolize them. We praise their purity. We call them strong. Strength without boundaries is just a slow form of decay. Shouko's silence is not peace. It's internalized guilt. The belief that her suffering is her fault. That she must accommodate the world's cruelty instead of confronting it. Mob, too, begins his story by suppressing everything. His power, his emotions, his needs, cause he's afraid that expressing himself will make him dangerous, unlovable. But his real growth doesn't come from becoming stronger. It comes from finally letting himself feel. From realizing that he is allowed to take up space, not just as a weapon, but as a person. Let's take this deeper. What happens when you give and give and give, but never ask if you even wanted to? What happens when your yes is automatic? When your care is compulsory, becomes invasive, because kindness that isn't chosen is just another form of control over yourself, over others, over your fear of being unworthy. If you can't say no, your yes doesn't mean anything. It's not selfish to have limits. It's not cruel to say enough. In fact, boundaries are what make true kindness possible, because they ensure it comes from freedom, not fear. So how do we begin to untangle real goodness from performance? We start by asking, what does kindness look like when I'm not afraid? What does love feel like when it's mutual, not earned? What values are mine, and which ones were just survival strategies? And then we practice. We say no, even when it makes us sweat. We disappoint people who only loved our compliance. We rest, even when guilt knocks at the door. Not because it's easy, but because it's honest. Your goodness shouldn't require you to disappear. It shouldn't feel like a test you're always failing. It shouldn't leave you hollow at the end of the day, okay? True morality doesn't demand perfection. It invites presence. It says, you can be messy, okay? You can have needs, okay? You can make mistakes and still be a person of integrity. Because being good should never cost you your wholeness. Somewhere along the line, many of us got the message that to be good is to be quiet, that to be kind is to be small, that to be loved is to never upset anyone. And so we learn to split ourselves, to exile the anger, hide the fear, bury the grief, to smile when we're seething, to forgive when we haven't even been acknowledged, to be good, even when it feels like dying inside. But wholeness was never about being agreeable. It was about being true. And you are allowed to be whole. Let's go back to Tanjiro Kamado, so often held up as the epitome of compassion. From the beginning, he shows extraordinary kindness, even to the demons who try to kill him. He listens to their stories. He offers them peace in their final moments. It's beautiful, but it's also heartbreaking, because for much of his journey, Tanjiro doesn't allow himself to feel his fury, to hate what has hurt him, to be angry at the world for what it's taken. He sees his anger as something dangerous, something impure. And in doing so, he splits himself. Kindness on the outside, rage hidden in the dark. But eventually, something shifts. In later arcs, we see Tanjiro's anger awaken, not as a loss of compassion, but as an extension of it. He fights harder because he cares more. His fury isn't mindless. It's rooted in love and a desire to protect, to end cycles of harm, up to survive. Anger and compassion can coexist, because wholeness isn't choosing one emotion over the other, okay? It's allowing them to all have a seat at the table. You're not bad because you feel deeply. You're not weak because you cry or shout or say, "This hurt me." That's not brokenness. That's being human. Izuku Midoriya is another example. He starts his journey idolizing All Might, the perfect symbol of peace, the man who never falters, never fears, always smiles. So Deku tries to live up to that impossible image. He gives everything, his time, his body, his voice, until there's almost nothing left. He doesn't complain. He internalizes guilt for things beyond his control. He smiles through exhaustion, but beneath the hero mask, there's a scared, grieving boy who doesn't know how to say, "I can't do this alone." It isn't until much later, during the Vigilante arc, that Deku starts to unravel. He isolates himself, pushes others away. His power increases, but his soul fractures. And that's when his friends find him, dirty, exhausted, drowning in self-blame. And they tell him, "You're still worthy, even now." Not because he's powerful, not because he's perfect, but because he's real and human and hurting. And slowly, he begins to learn. Being a hero doesn't mean erasing yourself. It means standing for something, even if that something includes your vulnerability. The strongest thing you can do is be seen as you are, not the version you polished, not the version you perform. The real you, raw, honest, whole. Let's talk about what wholeness really means. It doesn't mean feeling good all the time. It doesn't mean being endlessly patient or endlessly forgiving. Wholeness means making room for your entire inner life. The joy and the shame, the kindness and the fury, the calm and the chaos. Jung called this the process of individuation, becoming who you truly are by integrating your shadow. Because what you repress doesn't go away. It festers. It leaks out sideways. It builds resentment, self-loathing, and confusion. The goal isn't to get rid of the shadow, it's to bring it home. To say, "You get to be part of me too." Your rage, maybe it's there to protect your boundaries. Your grief, maybe it's the proof that you're loved. Your fear, maybe it's a voice that's just been waiting to be held. You don't have to silence these parts. You don't have to earn your right to feel. You just have to be willing to meet yourself as you are. You want to know what real moral courage looks like. Not self-sacrifice, not perfection, not being endlessly agreeable. It's this, saying, "I'm overwhelmed," instead of pretending you're fine. Saying that crossed a boundary even when your voice shakes. Saying, "I deserve rest," without guilt. Because when you stop performing goodness, you make room for real goodness. Not the goodness that avoids conflict at all costs. Not the goodness that erases itself to keep the peace, but the kind that comes from wholeness, from clarity, from choice. When you know who you are, not just the light, but the shadow too, you can choose to love, not out of fear, but out of freedom. This is the fear, isn't it? That if you let your whole self be seen, you'll be too much, too angry, too emotional, too intense. It's too selfish. But the truth, you are not too much. You are just finally refusing to shrink. And not everyone will like that. Some people will miss the version of you that kept the peace, that said yes when you meant no, that held your breath just to keep them comfortable. But you don't owe anyone the performance of peace. You owe yourself the right to exist, fully, unapologetically. Let the anger come. Let the sadness speak. Let the truth rise, not to destroy, not to lash out, but to integrate, to be whole. So here it is, the truth at the center of it all. You don't need to be nicer. You need to be real. You don't need to keep the smile on. You don't need to soften every edge. You don't need to silence yourself to be worthy of love, because the version of you that's tired, the version of you that's angry, The version of you that's grieving, that version deserves love too. You are allowed to be whole. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to stop auditioning for love and simply receive it. Not for being good, but for being you. You are not broken because you feel too much. Tess, you are not selfish for having limits, for saying no, for asking to be held. You don't have to destroy yourself to deserve love. The world might have taught you that goodness means self-erasure, that kindness means silence, that to be loved, you have to disappear a little. But that was never the truth. That was the trauma talking. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be tender and assertive. You are allowed to feel rage and still be kind. Healing doesn't look like perfection. It looks like permission. It's feel, to say, it's need. And if today, even for a second, you felt seen by a character, if something cracked open inside you, that's not weakness. That's the strength of being alive. As Carl Jung once wrote, I would rather be whole than good, because goodness without self is just performance. Wholeness, that's what makes you real. You're not here to be good. You're here to be whole. Something in this video resonated with you. Share it in the comments. Was it a line, a moment, a character you finally understood? Writing it out is more than reflection. It's healing. And if there's a character or anime you'd like us to explore next, let us know. This isn't just our journey. It's yours, too.